Hey everybody. So I wanted to go over relative risk because I know there's going to be some problems on your homework, and I wanted you to have uh, enough time to be able to go through those on your homework with also knowing a little bit more how to do relative risk. Um, so if we remember that our formula for relative risk is just the incidence in the exposed over the incidence in the non-exposed, or even just think about it as a comparison between two groups. So the incidence in group A over the incidence in group B. So put the table up from our problem today about concussions, and I think there might have been some confusion just with the wording on this. So what we're really interested in is what is the risk for sustaining a concussion, and your exposure would be whether you've had a previous concussion. So those that have had zero concussions, those that have had one concussion, and those that have had two or more concussions, those would be their exposures. And then we're looking to see if they sustain another concussion through the season or a concussion for the first time for that group that has had zero previous concussions. And so really calculating relative risk is pretty easy. It's just a comparison of two incidents. And, we've calculated incidence rates 100 times in this class. So really what we're interested in doing is just comparing those incidence rates. And so when we look at the first problem, what's the relative risk of concussion for those with two or more previous concussions versus those with no previous concussions? So our incidence in exposed group would be those with two or more previous concussions. So they've been exposed to two or more previous concussions. So to calculate the incidence for that, I'm simply just going to calculate my 300 divided by 600. And that's going to give me my incidence of concussion for those that have had two or more previous concussions. And let's divide that by the incidence in the non-exposed, or my referent group. So for this one, it's those that have never had a concussion before. So what is the incidence of concussion for this 2001-2002 season for that group? So that is 750 over 12,000. Okay? And so now I'm just going to calculate the ratio of these risks. And so what that's going to give me is a 0.5 divided by 0.6, 0.625, and that's going to give me a relative risk of 8. So if we remember what we talked about, what that number means, if we have a relative risk that is greater than 1, then that means there is an association with the risk factor. And so if we remember in class what we talked about what that 8 means, it could mean that those with two or more previous concussions were 8 times more likely to have a concussion during the season compared to those with no concussion history. Or if we remember our other formula about calculating a percentage, we would have 8 minus 1. We multiply that by 100. And so that would give us 700%. So that means that those with two or more previous concussions are 700% more at risk of sustaining another concussion during the season compared to those that had never had a concussion before. And so we can do the same thing for this group, so those that had one previous concussion. So how about the incidence rate for those that had one previous concussion was 250 divided by 1200. And then we're going to divide that by our referent group. So we already know the incidence in our referent group, 750 over 12,000. And that's going to equal, need to calculate that numerator out really quickly. It's going to be 0.208, and then we'll divide that by 0.0625. So it's going to give us a relative risk of 3.33. And so we would describe this the same way. So those with one previous concussion would be 3.33 times more likely to have had a concussion during the season compared to those with no concussion history. And I don't want y'all to get thrown off with the wording from this question, because it's a little bit confusing with that we're looking for an incidence of concussion and the risk factor is also concussions. So let's just think about it this way. Think about it as your risk would be number of packs of cigarettes you smoke today, and the incident you're interested in is lung cancer. So you can imagine if you use the table, if it makes it easier for you, just think about it being 0 packs a day, 1 pack a day, 2 or more packs a day, and then your incidence would be of lung cancer. So then you could just calculate out the same way and have your relative risk for cigarette smoking, packs of cigarettes smoked. So don't get too hung up on the concussion part of this. So hopefully that made a little more sense. I just wanted to go over this really quickly with y'all so y'all had a little bit better idea of what it'll look like on your homework. And we'll do some more about this on Monday, so we'll get a little bit more practice with that. So hope this helped, and y'all let me know if y'all have any more questions.